In this Sunday's Gospel, we read, "Now about 8 days after these sayings, he took with him Peter and John and James and went up on a mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the appearance of his countenance was altered, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, 2 men talked with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his exodus, which he was to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and those who were with him were heavy with sleep, but kept awake. And they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. And as the men were parting from him, Peter said to Jesus, 'Master, it is well that we are here. Let us make 3 booths, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah,' not knowing what he said. And as he said this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud saying, 'This is my Son, my chosen. Listen to him.' And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. And they kept silence and told no one in those days anything of what they had seen." During this Jubilee year of hope, each one of us has been invited by Pope Francis to embrace the transformative power of hope. He reminds us that as Christians, we are never without hope because of our trust in God, who always offers us a path to renewal and grace. This Lenten season, we are certainly called to be made new in the spirit of transfiguration that we read about in this Sunday's Gospel. While this story may be familiar to us, it is rich in meaning and provides profound insights into the nature of Christ and his mission. It holds layers of significance for both the disciples and for those of us that read it today. The Transfiguration reveals the glory of Jesus in a way that affirms his divine identity. His appearance becomes radiant, a visual sign of his divinity. The presence of Moses and Elijah further connects Jesus with the prophetic tradition of Israel. Moses represents the law, and Elijah represents the prophets, signaling that Jesus represents both, is the fulfillment of both. Their conversation with Jesus about his upcoming exodus, or the death and resurrection, ties his purpose to the salvation of humanity, fulfilling what had been written in the law and spoken by the prophets. This moment reassures the disciples of Jesus' role as the Messiah. Peter, John, and James are individually overcome by sleep, a reminder of maybe our own spiritual lethargy or our own inability to comprehend divine truths. However, when they are fully awake, they see Jesus in his glory alongside Moses and Elijah. This moment of spiritual awakening serves as a call for all of us to be attentive to God's revelation. Just as the disciples were physically asleep, we too can become spiritually numb or distracted in our everyday lives. But when we are awake to God's presence, we begin to perceive more clearly the wonder of his plan. Peter's offer to build 3 tents or booths represent his desire to preserve the moment, to hold on to that glorious mountaintop moment that he has borne witness to. His suggestion is good intention, but it misses the bigger picture. The desire to stay in the glory of God is common. It is our human instinct. But the voice from the cloud redirects everyone to listen to Jesus, not to stay on the mountaintop. Peter, in his enthusiasm, does not fully understand the depth of what he is witnessing. This, in our lives, maybe reflects the tendency to grasp at a temporary experience. Rather, we are each called to fully understand that a temporary experience, a temporary mountaintop moment, signifies a much deeper impact into God's plan for our lives. The voice from the cloud, identifying Jesus as the chosen Son and commanding that the disciples listen to Jesus, is the pivotal moment of divine affirmation in this Sunday's gospel. It is a confirmation of Jesus' identity as the Son of God and an invitation to trust his teachings. It shifts focus from Moses and Elijah to Jesus alone. The command to listen emphasizes the importance of embracing Jesus' mission, which will soon culminate in his crucifixion and ultimately in the resurrection. After this profound experience, the disciples fall silent. They do not immediately share what they have seen. Their silence is the same awe and the reverence and need for contemplation that we each have today. Sometimes when we experience God's presence, words fail us. Silence is the appropriate response to listen to what God is calling us to do next. The silence in the gospel invites us to reflect today on our own encounters with our God. How often do we allow moments of divine encounter to truly speak to us in ways beyond words? The transfiguration reminds us that Jesus is more than just a historical figure. Jesus is the living Son of God who came down from heaven for each one of us so that he might save humanity. We are simply invited to listen to him. We are invited to seek understanding of God's plan in our lives. And just as Peter and John and James had to awaken from their slumber to fully see Jesus' glory, we too are invited to wake up to the presence of Christ in our lives, to recognize his invitation, and to respond with trust, even when we don't fully understand. This week, we are not just called to celebrate his glory, but to follow him, to listen to his voice, and trust in the fulfillment of his mission.